Hello, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is episode number 7 of the podcast. I know it's a miracle. I've done 2 shows back-to-back weeks without missing a week. This is, I think, probably the first time this has ever happened in my quote-unquote career of doing this. I finally got one out back-to-back weeks on the times when I said I would, when I'm supposed to. So, give myself a little bit of a round of applause for that. Not really, but I told you guys I was coming back. I'm going to be back. I'm going to do the best I can to continue to do this every single week and maybe multiple times a week later on down the line, but for now, just once a week. So this is a big step for me. But anyways, we got a lot of stuff to talk about today, both some political stuff, and I also want to touch on a couple other things that I've been thinking about the last couple weeks and some stuff that's been going on lately. So I want to touch on that as well. But we're going to start off talking about a little bit of politics and stuff that's been going on just real quick. I don't want to get too far into depth into this stuff. It's very repetitive. Everybody talks about it. And there's only so much I can say without making it repetitive and boring for 30 minutes or however long I could choose to go on about. I could go on about it for as long as I want. I could go on about all this stuff all day and bring up all the statistics and numbers and different people say this and that and show you what they said on both sides of the argument. But at the end of the day, I don't want to do that. I just kind of want to touch on a topic and continue to move on and just basically ad-lib it. So the biggest news, you guys already know. This happened earlier on in the week. I'm recording this on a Sunday, the day before this is supposed to come out. So this has been known for a few days now, but the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, he is resigning due to his sexual assault allegations. You guys already know that. I tried to look up and see when that was going to take place. Unless I missed it, I didn't see that. I don't think it's going to be immediate, but maybe it is. So if I missed that, I apologize for that. You would think things in New York would improve with him not being the governor anymore, but we also thought that with California, and now Gavin Newsom is the governor. Well, he's not my governor because I'm not from California, but you guys get the point. You thought California couldn't get any worse, and then Gavin Newsom came into power. So I guess we'll see what happens with the successor to Cuomo. I saw the name on some of the articles up. Her name is Kathy Hochul. I might have mispronounced that. If I did, sorry. She was New York's lieutenant governor. That's kind of how it works, but I don't know anything about her really at all. I'm not from New York either, so I really couldn't care less, to be honest. I'm only trying to focus on what's going on in my state, 'cause it's not like my state's that much better. I mean, it is to an extent, but at the same time, it's not. But anyways, I don't know too much about her. I guess we'll see what happens once she actually starts to take office. There's a 14-day gap period, I guess, where she gets to kind of settle in and set up her cabinet and stuff how she wants and stuff like that, which I guess makes sense. But with most things, pretty much everything, only time will tell. So I guess we'll see what happens in New York. Obviously, only time will tell, and I think it's good that he's out, though. Again, I talked about this in the last podcast episode, where at that point it was just kind of allegations, and he hadn't really said anything, and he hadn't resigned at this point. But I talked about the fact and how I believe in the innocent until proven guilty aspect, and that although I'm not a fan of his, I do support following through with that precedent. If he does prove to be, I guess obviously he's basically admitting that he is guilty by resigning, or else why would he? If he truly believed that he was innocent, he would just stay in office and let people do their jobs and investigating, and he would come back clean if he was. So I guess by him resigning, I guess that's basically him admitting to the world that he is guilty in what he's been charged for. So I guess that doesn't matter anymore. That's just kind of the way I see it, because it wouldn't make sense for him to resign if he truly knew that he was innocent, But I don't know, man. Obviously New York's been one of, if not the state hit the heaviest by COVID-19, which in some ways makes sense because New York City is so compact and so crowded. Like, if you've never been to New York City, I've been there twice in my lifetime. New York City, it's almost like a whole other world there. It's just so compact, but yet so big at the same time that it would make sense that a virus would spread more in a place like that rather than some rural area. Like, obviously that makes sense, but I think the main issue comes in where his handling of it was just 10 times worse than other states. But anyways, there's other stuff we could go into of why I don't, not just COVID related, like, COVID's one part of it, but some of his policies are just absolutely ridiculous. But I'm not going to try and get too repetitive, but we'll see what happens with this new, she was the lieutenant governor, but now she's going to be the governor now. We'll see kind of how she does. I don't know. At the end of the day, like, you would hope for the people of New York's sake that it doesn't get any worse. That's kind of all I want to talk about that. It just gets so repetitive, and I don't want to get into it too much, but I do want to talk about this. This just happened today. So, as I mentioned before, I'm recording this on Sunday. This has kind of been going on more recently, but the Taliban took over the capital of Afghanistan, Kabul, or Kubal, I believe that's how it's spelled. I'm not sure if it's like kind of pronounced a different way, but they took over. Biden's been kind of removing troops from the area. Here's the thing about the Middle East. I've never really been a huge fan of military intervention in that area, just because, like, I truly do believe in the precedent of America first. And if you look at some of the issues that we have at home, like in the United States domestically, we have not come any closer to fixing some of the major issues in this country, like especially with how reverse some things have gone under the Biden administration. And it's only been, 7 months? We still got basically 3.5 more years of this. So immigration's out of control. The moral of the story here that I'm trying to say is we don't have a lot of issues in the United States under control, and I feel like it's making it that much harder to try and police other people half a world away when within our own borders there's still a lot of issues. Here's an analogy to kind of explain what I'm trying to get at here, and I love this because this has almost become my way of thinking in life lately. Is imagine that the United States is yourself, and then every other country in the world is another person or someone else. Like, that would make sense. If you don't look after yourself and take care of yourself, in this case yourself being the United States people, this is from Biden or any other elected official's perspective. If you don't look after yourself and better yourself, it makes it so much more difficult for you to try and look after for and take care of other people and other people's needs. In this case, other people literally being other people in the Middle East and any other country for that matter. If you don't have your life or your country in a good spot, and I'm not saying America's in a bad spot, but we definitely have our issues. Like, if people don't admit that, like, they're just lying to themselves. It's as simple as that. If you're not willing to fix yourself first and to correct your issues first, you're not going to be able to effectively help out someone else. And I feel like that applies to everything, including this situation with American involvement in the Middle East. Think about how much money over the past 20 years since 9/11 we have put into our military and into wars and intervention in the Middle East. We've been for 20 years, and now look what happened. The Taliban took over the capital. Like, it's almost like, not almost, like, it basically, it just does not end. I don't, obviously I can see both sides to the argument. There's always a gray area. There's not always black and white. There's always a gray area in pretty much literally everything. People argue, we can't let the Taliban, ISIS, other groups like that, we can't let them just take over and impose their will on anyone that they please. And I get that, but eventually we got to ask ourselves, is this worth it for our country, our men and women in the military that are over there? Is this worth it for them? Is this worth it in terms of our money, in terms of, again, I think most importantly here would be the men and women in the service. Is this worth it for them? And, I know people my age that are in military, they enlisted, or some of them are really young officers. And I think if you were to ask them, is it worth it for the United States to be in the Middle East for 20 years and still nothing happens, nothing really productive gets done in fighting this force? Is it worth it? I would argue, I can't say for sure because I haven't asked them, but I would argue that definitely more than half would say it's not worth it. Maybe I'm wrong, I could be wrong, but just based on their personality and what I know from them, some of them are really good friends, so I know them, and I know kind of their opinions on it. A lot of them would say that 20 years, it's just not worth it in the end. Now, I will say, I do think part of the issue here is Biden has done absolutely nothing to push back at all on what's going on. One of the things I loved about what Trump did is he was very upfront, and he let leaders of ISIS, and he was very vocal about consequences of actions in the Middle East, and that really kind of basically ISIS was nothing. It was a very good time, very low key time in the Middle East. It seemed like, obviously I'm not there. They always have issues in and around that region in certain different areas, but it was definitely not as intense or as deadly as times in the past. And Biden has not continued with that kind of, I wouldn't say aggression, but abrasiveness. I'm trying to think of the right word here to explain kind of what I'm trying to say, but anyways, he hasn't made them fear the United States, basically, is what I'm trying to say. He hasn't made them question their actions. They just do whatever they want because they know he won't do anything. And, the Middle East is a very tough situation because I feel like with the situation going on over there, we gotta pick a side. We can't flip-flop when presidents go in and out. We can't flip-flop between, okay, we're going to be, aggressive and, kind of lay down the law a little bit and let them know what the consequences would be for your actions, and then you get a new president in office, and then you don't really do anything about it, so they go back to doing whatever they want, and then we go back, we keep going back and forth, and nothing really gets accomplished one way or another. It's like we keep staying there for 20 years and nothing happens. I feel like that's the big issue. So we need to pick. Are we going to get completely involved in the Middle East and try and do the same thing we did back in the Bush administration, back when 9/11 was fresh in our minds, and still we haven't defeated terrorists in the region? Or are we just going to completely let things go and just let the Middle East basically patrol itself and have zero contact or intervention with that region? And I think as a country we need to make that decision. And it's a tough one to make because there are valid arguments on both sides, I think. But I think at the end of the day, we gotta look at ourselves and understand that we have issues with our people and our country that haven't been resolved, that have been put off for so long, that are fixable. Maybe not overnight, but are fixable. And we gotta ask ourselves, what's more important to us as a country? Anyways, I was kind of all over the place with that, but that's okay. Like that's kind of what I want to do. I want to be all over the place. I want to basically just spew out whatever comes to mind. But that was one of the big news events from this week, is the Afghan Capital did fall. Their president, I forgot his name. I'd have to go back and look at it, but he fled. He fled the capital. I believe it was earlier this morning, today, Sunday. So that's the big news. Obviously COVID's still going on, but I'm not gonna talk about that on this episode. I talked about that last week, and it's just the same things, like people arguing on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter all the time. Like I get tired of it eventually and just want to live life. So we're gonna move on. I've been a little bit under the weather the past couple of days. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice, maybe a little bit. Like, I've been trying to drink more water. I think Thursday was when I really started to feel it coming on. It's nothing too bad. Like, you can probably tell in my voice a little bit. It's a little bit scratchy, but it's not like super bad to where like you can really tell. I mean, I can just tell hearing me talk that it is a little bit like scratchy. And I literally just took a drink of water, so that's going on. I do have a little bit of like a cough. Just been like tired a little bit. It hasn't been like super bad to where I'm like in bed all day, but just a little tired. And let's see what else has been going on. I mean, runny nose a little bit, but nothing too bad. That's really about it. Like, it really hasn't been that bad. I didn't get tested for COVID because it's not bad enough. Like, I don't feel the point of getting tested for it if it's not like really bad to where like I'm stuck in bed all day and just hate life. I'm not at that point, and I feel like at this point it's been like 3-4 days since this has been a thing, and it really hadn't gotten any worse. So I'm like, well, I'll just wait it out. I actually do hope it is COVID, just so like that's even proof that this lockdown stuff is pointless, because it's basically just like a cold. So I don't know if it is COVID or not. Like I said, I haven't got tested for it, but I hope it is, just for even more proof that, like, I think it's funny, like when you see people on I see people on Instagram, like people that I follow on like my personal account, like people that I went to high school with or whatever. They'll put up posts on their like on their Instagram story about like something from like a feminist account or something, talking about about COVID, and like the people in the comments will like the caption will be like, they'll talk about like how people who don't want the vaccine or don't want masks are selfish or whatever, and then they'll say like, well, they don't want to wear a mask and they don't want to get the vaccine and whatever, so what do they want to do? And then like people in the comments will be like, they want to die. It's like, you know that like 99.99997% of the entire population that gets COVID survives. It's like, what? It's like the possibility of dying from COVID-19 is statistically insignificant. Obviously, I know there are people that die from it, but 99.97% you immediately jump to the conclusion that if you get COVID, you're going to die. It's like, I think it's funny. It's actually kind of funny that they're like, oh, you're gonna die from this. It's like, dude, no, I'm not. Especially if what I have right now is COVID. Like, oh, it's kind of funny actually that they just immediately think that. But anyways, yeah, I don't know how accurate the tests are either. Like, that's another thing. Back in, when was it? Probably September. It was almost a year ago. It was last year. I was in contact with somebody who got a COVID test, and they tested positive for COVID, but they didn't have any symptoms. So I guess they were asymptomatic. Like, I don't even know if the test works, but apparently they tested positive for it, but had no symptoms. And at that exact same time when this guy that I know got tested for it and he tested positive for it, I was sick. Not like sick, but it's kind of similar to what I have now. Cough, basically just like a cold. And since I was like in contact with him, like we were in the same car and like we were hanging out and stuff like all the days before he got tested, so I was like, okay, there's probably a pretty good chance, like considering I kind of have like a cold or something, there's probably a good chance that I have it. So I actually did at that time go and get tested for it, and the test came back and it was negative. So I didn't have it, but I was sick, and I was in contact with this guy who supposedly tested positive for it. So that, it literally doesn't make sense to me. Like, we weren't in the same bed or anything. Like, don't get it wrong, but we were in a car together, and like, I don't remember exactly what we were doing, but like we were hanging out, and like we were basically like, we're in the same car together, like we're in contact. So, and I didn't test positive for it, and I had some type of cold or something. So that's another thing. I don't know how accurate or reliable those tests are. Like, it's hard to say. But anyways, yeah, that's been going on. You guys probably can tell. So I hope I have it, just so that like it just makes it even more funny when I read the comments on Instagram and Twitter that like, you're gonna die if you get it and you're unvaccinated. It's like, okay. This is the last thing I want to get into today in this episode. I feel like this is getting kind of long. I don't know, it's hard to tell, because like I've split it up a couple times, going back and forth between articles and stuff. But I want to talk about the importance of taking responsibility for your actions. Now, hear me out. I want you guys to think for a second. How many politicians in this country take responsibility for what they say, what they do, their actions? How many of them take responsibility for those things? None that I can think of. They all either blame issues that are definitely at least in part their fault. They either blame it on other people, or they just ignore it and let it go and act like it didn't ever happen. It's like, well, you can't do that, especially if you're an elected official in very high government position in this country. When there's problems, you can't just let things go and act like they didn't happen. But that's exactly what they do. They don't take responsibility for their actions. I also want you guys to consider this for a second. How many successful people in this world? Now, success is a relative term, and what you define as success may be different from me or from someone else. But how many successful people in this world do you guys think made it to where they are in their life or career by blaming things that they did on other people? I would argue probably none. You can get away with it a few times, by blaming stuff on other people, ignoring it, doing whatever you gotta do. You can get away with it a few times, but eventually it will catch up to you. So what I want you guys to take away from this is, I want you to accept responsibility for your actions, whether they were right or wrong in the moment. Accept responsibility for that, because it will help you later on down the line. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to not know something. But what really matters is that you learn from that. You learn why you were wrong or what went wrong. And then learn from that. Take what you can from that experience that you need to be better the next time a certain situation or circumstance comes around a next time. How you adapt to something is more important than the fact that you were wrong. Because we're all wrong. We all make mistakes. We're all human. It's like, if people expect you to be perfect and know everything, they're not being they're not being realistic. It's like, why would they expect you to be perfect if they're not perfect themselves? Why would they expect you to know everything? I know for a fact they don't know everything themselves, because no one knows everything. But what really matters at the end of the day is not that you don't know, but it's that you understand that you don't know and use that to your advantage to be better in later situations. Hopefully that made sense. I don't know. I just kind of went off whatever came off in my head at that time. But I wanted to talk about that a little bit, because I think it's important. Politicians don't take responsibility for their actions. And eventually, we don't do a good job of this. I guess the only way to do it is to vote them out, I guess. But we need to find a way to hold politicians accountable for when they lie to us or blame issues that are directly their fault on other people. We need to find a way to hold politicians and people in power responsible for when they do things like that, because it's not okay to do that repeatedly, especially when you're in a high authoritative position like a lot of these people are. They're the ones that do it the most. They lie and blame it on other people. Like, when you think about it, and you ask someone who lies and blames their problems on other people more than anyone else, like, one of the first types of people you think of is politicians, and that's not at all the way it should be. But unfortunately, that is how it is. But yeah, I'm gonna wrap it up here. I told you guys last week on the last episode of the podcast that I was gonna put up a question poll on my Instagram and read off those questions on the next show, which is this one. Some questions you guys asked me, and of course I forgot. And as soon as I remembered, it was time for me to start recording, and like at that point, it wouldn't have been able to get enough questions in that I would have liked. I want to do it at least like a day in advance, but of course I forgot. So we're gonna have to put that on hold till next week. Watch, I bet you I forget again, but hopefully not. Hopefully I remember, because I used to do the question thing back before when I did this show a little bit, and I like doing the questions and hearing from you guys and seeing some of the stuff that you guys asked me. So hopefully I don't forget next week, but I'm going to wrap this up here. If you have any topics or anything you guys want me to talk about, obviously there'll be stuff that goes on this week with more news regarding the Middle East and probably Cuomo and COVID and all the same shit that goes on, but we'll have new topics for next week. But if you guys want to hear any other stuff, like, you guys can either DM me, or that's probably the best way, because if you comment something on a post, I might not see it. If you DM me, I'm more likely to see it, believe it or not. Some of you guys have like DM'd me on Instagram and stuff about like listening to the show and stuff. I appreciate you guys. You guys know who you are. Like, there's some of you on here that do that, so I appreciate you. I'm gonna wrap this up. I'll talk to you guys next week. Have a great weekend, work week, whatever you do. Enjoy it. Take it easy. Enjoy the time with your family. And yeah, that's it. Peace out.